Okay, welcome to Women in Linux. Today we have our conference speaking panel or our conference panel. Because we have one young fellow in the house, we're going to start with him and we'll go down the line. We have Michael Jenkins on the line. Say hi, Mike.
Hi, everybody.
Then we have Linda Bell. She rocks the bells, but we have Linda Bell broadcasting live from DC.
Yep,
Linda, say hi.
DC in the house.
And then we have what we call D Parlor. D Block Parlor is here in the house broadcasting live from Florida. D, please say hi to the fans.
Hello, and she's taking over my moderating duty because she's just excited.
And then we have Grace Andrews. Grace, you say hi to the people broadcasting live. She has over 100 years of experience. I'm just playing. She she has experience in terms of speaking. I had a chance to see Grace at Puppet. So Grace, please give a shout out to everyone.
Hello, everyone.
And then it's me. I'm not going to be the moderator. I've been banned, but I will help with navigating the slides and what other questions you have. Feel free to post those questions over and don't post them in Slack because I won't see them. But please post them here, or if you feel the need that you want to jump in and it's something that you want to ask, please feel free to ask. This is kind of an open forum. We do not want you to feel like you're being isolated or anything of that nature. So we're turning it over to D. She's moderating for us.
Okay, so just before we start, because we have multiple speakers, we're going to do this one a little different. So we are going to ask all the people that are in the meetup, besides the presenters, to go ahead and put themselves on mute so we don't hear the background chatter. We want you to go ahead and open up your chat box. It's located on the right side of your screen. And if you look at the bottom, there's an everyone, and then everybody in here has their own little private inbox. For any questions, I'm going to be checking out the everyone. And if you don't mind, just type a little Q, and I'll know that you raise your hands followed by a semicolon, so I can make sure to be alerted for those questions. Before we start, does anybody have any questions? All right. Well, again, thank you for coming. And we're going to start. So this is our Wednesday meetup. We do this virtually every Wednesday. We're very, very excited because this is the first time we're having a panel of this sort. As far as what we like to do is, we go slum at the conferences. And I think everybody here, we've probably met at a conference, or sometimes we've met Grace at a conference. Linda, no, I don't know how we met Linda. We met Giselle at a conference, and some other people. We've just been, just homies for a long time. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So welcome to the Women in Linux conference panel. And so the first step is going to be Michael Jenkins in picking your talk.
Yeah, I could just kind of hit the ground running with this topic. And I know we got a couple bullets to hit there, but again, if anybody has any questions, as Dee mentioned, please put them in the chat, and we'll address them that way. But the first bullet on there, how to pick your topic. Well, I approach this a couple different ways. If you're actually going to be speaking at a conference that has a very specific topic, for instance, AWS reInvent is very specific on using Amazon Web Services and the products that they provide, or PuppetConf. They're talking about Puppet and as a tool and how that helps you with your DevOps in your enterprise. Look at the topic that the conference is focused on. Generally speaking, at a higher level, and then within that topic, you might find some smaller topics. Again, going back to the AWS example, AWS is kind of the global topic, but within that, you might have topics on deployment, or using Lambda functions, or working with load balancers and getting optimal throughput. So you can pick topics that are a subset of the overall topic. Beyond that, I think the third thing I would do is look inwardly at myself as a speaker and where my expertise lies. So, I mean, my expertise is in web services. So again, going back to the AWS example, I would look at deployments or optimizing throughput for applications that are deployed to web services or to Amazon Web Services. Somebody else also told me another way to kind of pick a topic is to share that aha moment, because a lot of times people say, well, I'm not an expert, I don't know too much about this one particular topic. And they say, oh, I'm not qualified to speak at this conference. Well, if you've ever had a moment where you're using some technology and you reached a point where you're like, oh man, that really just kind of clicked for me. I understand how this works now. Then that's your opportunity to share that lesson or that, the quest that brought you to that point with other people. Because more than likely, there are other people in that same situation as you that are just learning this technology, just getting started, and they haven't reached that aha moment yet. But if you put that, your journey in a presentation or a package that somebody else can consume, they might read it, and that just helps them along the way, to their aha moment. And I mean, I don't want to hog this topic. If anybody else has anything that they want to contribute, I'm willing to share the floor at this point.
Yeah, I think Linda has a question. Go ahead, Linda.
Oh,
Are you?
no, I thought I was just
Oh,
following directions.
oh, you just following directions. Okay. Well, I do want to add, I do want to add as far as like picking your topic. So for me, I went through interview yesterday with Brian Louds over at, well, he was at Digital Ocean. He's now at Capital One, and I ended up talking to him about picking a topic, and what he said was that he did. I wouldn't say everyone do this, but it makes sense to do it. What he did was he's like he looked at what they had before, and then he looked and said, okay, well, I'm gonna pick something I know nothing about, and he
Oh,
researched it,
wow.
and he
Okay.
researched what uh he said he researched it. He figured out like his part of his journey and explaining the topic was his research and what he found out about it. And so that was his presentation, the research on it, finding out how to use it, and then maybe doing a comparison of, do I suggest that you apply for a talk saying you're going to do big data and you've never touched Linux before, or you never touched it? I wouldn't say that. Like, that's reaching, right? But it may not be reaching. That may be the only talk you do for the whole year, and you may present that talk, say, in 2019. Well, if that's what you're going to do, that's fine. Just remember, that's just a lot of research that you're going to do in order to be, involved in that. So that was just an aspect that, that he presented to me, that I was like, okay, that makes sense, because you have to do the research behind it. So, it may be something that you're comfortable with. That's what I would add. It may be something like, for me, I give, and I tell people all the time, like, I give stuff like 30 minutes to an hour for me to figure it out. If it take me a week or 2 days, I'm over it, because I have to move on. So I just look at it and say, well, what can you pull out of that you can learn really, really quickly, and then say, okay, well, I could take that and integrate it into what I already know. So it just kind of be like an extra node off of your skill, like you just adding it onto your toolbox. That would be my suggestion.
And I did want to add, I guess, one more thing to this particular point. The last point where it's I guess asking for input on understanding the audience. And the best way to look at that is to look at the conference itself and the level at which the information is intended to be presented for attendees of that conference. So in this case, the audience are the people who are going to the conference. Some conferences, they are very expert specific, and they expect everybody that's coming in to have some level of understanding of the topic that's going to be presented. Other conferences are just the opposite. They're totally for beginners. They don't expect anybody to know anything about the topics that are going to be presented. And of course, there's a mixed bag in between that particular spectrum. So if you think about your expertise, or again, your aha moment, if you feel like you're not an expert, think about the audience. If it's an audience of mostly beginners, then you can be comfortable, or you should feel comfortable presenting a topic that's at a 101 level. However, if it's a conference that's for professionals that are 20 years in the game or whatever the case is, then you might need to spend a little bit more time researching your topic and make sure that you're knowledgeable about the content that you're going to present. And I will temper that with saying a lot of times conferences will ask as you submit your proposal, and I think we kind of get into that, later on the talk. They will say, what level of, what I guess level of expertise is the person that's going to be here, or how can I say this? Basically, what level is your talk going to be presented at? Is it going to be for experts? Is it going to be for newbies and intermediate levels and so on? So you can even tell the conference, the people who are reviewing the proposals that your conference isn't intended for any particular level.
I want to add to that too. So when we actually, let me give you a little background on in terms of picking your topic, picking your conference too kind of matters. Let me slide
We're
back.
going to go back to that. We're
Okay.
going to give you your I'm going to reverse after we understand our audience. So you're going to get a chance to talk
Okay.
on that. Has anybody got any input on understanding your audience? I'm going to take that as a no. So we're going to go in reverse.
Yeah. I wanted to hone in on this. So for me, um, picking my talk and picking my conference. So a couple of things here is there's a website, and I'm gonna post this. When I post this on YouTube, I'm gonna post some references and stuff that I found. And also I'll post these slides as well too. But papercall.io, and allconferences.com. Here's somebody that wants to do a job. If anybody wants to make some money, allconferences.com is cool. Papercall.io is cool. But if you can find a way to come up with a way to say where all the conferences are at, the time and the topics and what level, and give a little feedback on the, I guess, the people that attend that conference, you'll make some money, because it's hard to go out and find out where you're supposed to find these conferences at. So papercall.io is one. Allconferences.com, you have to kind of filter through. O'Reilly Media has a lot of conferences, and they're mainly, in terms of the U.S., they're mainly in San Francisco, San Jose, Austin. I think they're going back to Portland this year for OSCON, or next year, and then New York. We will, those are their main spots. The Linux Foundation kind of has their singular conferences. Like they'll have one for Linux, they'll have one for automotive, they'll have one for security. The same with O'Reilly, and as Mike mentioned before, the different technologies. And those different technologies may be AWS, there may be Puppet, there may be Chef, there may be something in robotics, VR, AR. So you kind of have to feel around and kind of search for those things. And that's why I say it would be great if we could have like a one-stop shopping type of app where you can go and say, well, I want to do robotics, and it goes out and finds out where all the conferences are at that handles robotics. It's a good idea. So, but if we could have something like that, that'd be great. But in terms of also picking your conference, um, on my research, what I found is a lot of people look for a code of conduct. So you may find a conference that doesn't really suit your needs in terms of like what their code of conduct is. I give you a prime example, and it's not to bash AWS, but I talked to several women who went to the AWS reInvent last year, and they were uncomfortable. They felt like a fish in a sea of men.
Mm.
So understand, who's attending those conferences, because you may not feel comfortable at that conference. You may not feel comfortable even presenting at that conference. You may just want to go in and check it out. Just check out what scan the audiences on YouTube or wherever they post their stuff. Scan the audience and see who's there and who's speaking. Another thing is, you may have kids, so you may need a conference that caters to you having kids and they have a nursery. I'm not sure how comfortable you are with that, but a lot of conferences are doing that now. they're actually catering to those parents that have single kids. And then a lot of conferences are catering to kids coming to the conferences. So they're having conferences where the kids are actually coming out to the conference that day or for that 2 days while you go off to your conference. So just be on the lookout for those things, because it's really important, if you're a single parent and you want to speak, but you have to go to Chicago, but you can't leave your kid because you got parent duty. you know so just some things just to be on the lookout for when you're picking out your conferences, and also be on the lookout for how many people are showing up to the conferences. If it's a small conference, then you could probably get away with beginner talks. But if it's something like a specialized conference, like I looked at the VR AR conference and I was like, hey, I want to do maybe a diversity talk, and I was like, may not be the best place for that talk. Look around, see what they've done before, go on their YouTube, maybe do a different spin on what somebody has done. So just some ideas for picking out your conferences. Is there any questions on that?
I did want to add something, if I may.
Hmm.
Um, not a question, but kind of a point. I know we're kind of focusing on conferences in this particular talk, but I think at another level, people may think, well, hey, maybe I'm not at that conference level of presenting yet. How can I, kind of get my feet wet? And I think meetups are a great way to do that. If you have local meetups that focus on a topic that you're interested in, like Python programming or Perl programming. Here in Los Angeles, we have hundreds of meetups that are focused on technology. You name it, there's probably a meetup for it pretty much any night of the week. So, and those meetup organizers are always looking for people that will present to their members. So that's an excellent way to get started. That's kind of how I got my start with conference speaking, is just, picking up, some time at a meetup and sharing what I was working on at work day to day.
Oh, that's awesome. Now, that is true, and thank you guys again for coming and speaking at our meetup. Also, I want to throw in the bucket Sketch. Sketch is used by most conferences worldwide on getting their schedule put for organizing your schedule for your conference. However, they have a conference listing in there. So if you are looking for any topic, go to Sketch and just do a search and put in a keyword. You'll be amazed at what comes up in your area for that. So I just wanted to throw Sketch in the bucket as well for conference selections.
We had a question on how to spell that.
SCHED, Sketch, short for schedule. It's actually what we're using for our conference as well. So you can just go to that link when you go on Eventbrite and look at the schedule for our conference. We're using that.
And that was the plug. Remember, August 19th, uh, Women in Linux conference. That's the
Allah.
plug. That's the plug.
Let's see. Alrighty. So our next step up is putting your talk together, and then we have Linda Bell and Grace Andrews. Thanks for joining us. So who's going to take the first bullet on how your slides to look? I think that's you, Linda.
Yeah, I can. Yeah, 'cause I gave Tameika a few slides, so we can just run through those and
Okay.
Grace jump in.
And let me know again when I hit you up in the PM, but just let me know when you want me to go next.
Okay. So I found just a few slides that represented probably not your best look for slides for talks. And this one I kind of said this is like a slide, a flow chart on steroids. Like I don't know what the flow chart is doing. It's got a lot of words on it, and it's just trying to give you all the data at one time. So keep in mind that your purpose for the slide is to communicate conclusions and insights, and don't overwhelm your audience. Next. D next. So this one is, I don't know what this slide is saying. There's a lot going on here. The colors are flowing everywhere. Bullets are everywhere. It's a lot of information. So try to stick to your messaging and just make it like, just, you know, stay on message. Stop, don't do this. Next. So I found this one, and of all people, this is Bill Gates. And I think the message here is something about cloud, but he's got a lot going on here. So my advice would be to put one image on your slide. Next. So I found some slides that I thought were pretty good, and they have to do with project management. So I thought I'd make a plug while showing these. No project without milestones. Like, you got to measure and know where you're going with this. But one key concept, very few words, take it easy on the text, and try to find high quality images to use. Next. Three things: time, budget, quality, tenant and project management. And notice that this also has sort of the same theme, kind of a cloud background, very simple wording. Next. Learn to say no. It's my mantra. Yay. But
Mine too.
yours too. I think this is another good example. And these slides all have a, you know, a central theme, simple, and good quality images. Next.
Okay. So I do apologize that I have to go back a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't, speaking of themes, we're using a theme and it doesn't allow me that little box on the side to kind of click them. So thank you for your patience with Prezi.
Prezi's doing what his Prezi's supposed to do. So,
Okay.
Grace, do you want to take animations?
Absolutely. I don't have any slides to show you of what's a good animation and what's not. But what I will talk about is specifically, I think that whenever you see a lot of really good slide shows, they actually don't have a lot of animations. I was once guilty of being a Prezi-aholic. I'll be the first one to admit it. When I was in grad school, I discovered Prezi, and I thought that maybe Moses had come down from the mountain and had brought me a list of commandments, and 1 through 10 were, "Thou shalt use Prezi." I thought Prezi was my new friend. Every presentation, it could have been a 5-minute presentation, I was like, "Look at my Prezi!" And getting to the place where I could even use Prezi would take at least an hour. And Prezi became unwieldy because Prezi in its simplest format is very nice. But no one ever wants to do a simple format. Once you learn that as a student, you get Prezi Professional for free, and that you can make your words do loops like this across the screen and then bounce to a stop, you insist that that's what you need for that, you know, presentation in class, and it's really not. So one of my biggest pieces of advice is actually stay away from animation. And if you're going to use animation, keep it very simple. You don't want people to be so distracted by the animation that's happening on your slide that they're not listening to your words. We are in the era of, I think that this is going to be known as the age of cat gifs. And so as much as we, you know, there is the age of the steel age, there was the industrial revolution, and there will be cat gifts. And so one day historians will look back and that's going to be what our, you know, species did for 300 years. And since we're at the beginning of it, I encourage folks to calm down. And so what I mean by that is gifts are awesome. They're actually a really good use of entertainment. that can be really appealing, eye-catching, and instantly get your point across in an animated fashion that standard still photography or really terrible Googled images can't. But once again, you know, with great power comes great responsibility, as Peter Parker's uncle told him. And so you have to be very careful how often you use GIFs. They're really great as an opening. They're really great in the middle to capture people's attention again if you have a longer presentation, and they're really great as a closing. Don't make your deck one that's full of animated GIFs. That's obnoxious. And so that's definitely something that I know, once again, I have been guilty of these crimes. So don't live in a glass house, but I want to throw cotton balls and encourage others to make a change today. It's not too late. And so that's how I approach animations in presentations.
And next up, the text in the slide, Linda handled that. What I didn't put down on here was the image, and I'm guilty of the shady image. And when I say the shady image, I mean the blurry image, where you're sitting in the back and you're looking and you're like, I'm not really sure what that's supposed to say. Or my favorite is the picture that you take because you want to cover the whole screen in PowerPoint, so you stretch it to the gods, and
Hmm.
it's
Terrible.
so
Fuzzy.
so it's
A
fuzzy, so
fuzzy JPEG.
it's grayed out. So with that, please don't do that. Just try to find something that can work, or maybe you put it in there with the right size, or to the right or to the left, and then you make some bullet points or something.
And there's nothing wrong with white space.
Yeah.
There's
Amen.
nothing wrong with white space, Linda. I
There's
agree.
nothing wrong with white space. You can just make the picture appropriately sized and have some white space.
Because I'm guilty of that. My slide that I did at OzCon, I went back and looked at it. I was like, "Can you guys see it?" And nobody said nothing. I went through it real fast because like you can't see it now because I'm getting ready to talk about it because it looked a mess.
I
And she
think
was
that
adamant about having those in there.
I think that raises an interesting point, though, about not being scared of white space. I'm not going to be that person. But I always, to make a presentation stand out with other presentations, especially if I'm speaking in a format where I have to go after other speakers and I want my talk to be memorable because #ego, I always use a dark deck. So what does that mean? I use dark gray. I use like a dark blue, a navy, or I use straight up light black, that subtly faded black that you have an option of that isn't like Black Panther blackest black, but it's black, but not real extra too black. You know what I'm talking about. These are the Crayola color names.
It's charcoal.
So yeah. Oh, is that what that's called? So
Yes,
it's
it's
called
like
not too
black, but not that it's black.
not
It's
extra,
transparent.
very extra black. Okay, got it. Charcoal black. That sounds great, and will fit on a Crayola. So I like to use that color because then I can use light gray or white text. And then already your presentation looks, bless you, looks really well put together, but also looks like something you want to see. And so even having those sort of subtle changes, those subtle tweaks on a traditional all white background with black Helvetica text, I always like to play with that a little bit. And, instead of using Helvetica or that godforsaken Times New Roman, using something like Calibri or using something. I love Open Sans. It's a Helvetica-esque font, but it's got smaller, thinner lines. It's got fuller text, and it stands out a little bit more. So it's okay to be strikingly plain. I don't know if that's possible unless you're a supermodel, but I do encourage folks to use those kinds of subtleties in their presentations so that you can have something that people want to look at. And then kind of using that as a trigger. Oh, wait, Michael, do you want to say something?
No, I'll chime in here in a minute.
I also wanted to encourage a lot of people to use GitHub. A lot of times people, if they're not giving a technical talk or they're giving a talk that doesn't involve code examples, they won't use GitHub. GitHub or any, platform like that, if you're using something else, it's just a great way to practice that skill, right? Being able to use some sort of visual editor to even write text and then push it up somewhere that people can access online is really cool. You can embed a lot of different types of images in GitHub. You can even put your slide deck up there. So it's a wonderful resource that especially a lot of us in the technical community are already using or should have a presence on. So it's a great way to just create a body of work. So if you ever need to show an employer or you ever need to show colleagues some presentations you've done, you can say, oh, just check out my GitHub handle. I've got a bunch of repos on there, presentations I've done in the past. So I think it just gives you a singular place to have all of your work that other people can access, that you can also actively change, right? It's living, it's breathing. If you need to make any modifications to past presentations, it's up there. And then if you are pushing code or if you are giving a technical talk, that's a wonderful resource. A lot of times people want to see your code so they can replicate your code. So making sure that you have a README so people even know what's going on, making sure you have examples for them to use. You can put all of your supporting references there if you don't want to blast it all out on your slideshow. It's just a really great way to streamline all of your resources and arrange them in an attractive manner that encourages people to go back and look at it often.
And I want to add to that that you talked about is font. So there is, and I gotta find this site. I actually showed it to Dion, where this guy actually created font for slides, and his fonts are very nice. And I have to find those fonts for you and present them to you, because one of my biggest pet peeves is like finding the right font for the slides, because then I'm looking and I'm like, man, is that too big? Is it too in cursive where you can't tell what it is? And then you write something, you get something fancy, and you're not really keeping up with where you're at, and you look at the slide for a reference and you can't read it yourself. So, so because it's too fancy, so it's one of those things. So I'm really big on fonts and like an overall package. I'll have to find this guy that made these fonts, and it's free. I'm not gonna give you something you got to pay for, but it's a great tool to use for your slides. He made them in particular for slides because he got tired of people doing presentations and their fonts were boring, or it didn't. Like you want something that's playful, but not too playful where they're just focused on your font. Like, oh, his fonts was so nice on those slides. Like, no, you don't want that, but you still want to have an overall presentation because it is a brand of yourself. So you still want to have that. Is it
The
ever?
one, yeah, the one thing I wanted to add about text and slides is kind of is related, but it's kind of an offshoot because I mean we're talking about how text actually looks on slides, but as people are thinking about their presentations, when they're getting to the level where maybe that presentation will be shared beyond that presentation itself, the day and time that it's being presented. Um, I think we're kind of at a convergence now where a lot of presentations are becoming more TED Talk-esque, or more like
I think we lost Michael. He's frozen.
or
Oh, there
or,
you go.
or one or yeah, like one word or something like that. Uh, Hopefully, I'm not breaking up on you, but what I was saying was like a TED Talk really might not have a lot of text in it. So if your delivery is going to be such that it's recorded and people are just looking at you and what you're saying, and your slides are there as a reference, really as kind of like a point to carry, or I should say a reference to carry your point across, that's fine. But if you're going to be speaking in such a way that people will be picking your presentation up later and they have to go through it themselves without you being there, then you might have to add a lot of text in there. And that's kind of a tough point because I like to have slides that are minimal, maybe 3 bullets per slide with really big letters, really big font, really big text, because I'm thinking about when I have to present it, I want people to be able to see it from the back of the room. But I also realize that after that presentation, somebody might pick it up and want to refer to it. So in some cases like that, I'll actually have 2 versions of the slide, or I should say 2 versions of the presentation, one that I present off of, one that maybe gets recorded or whatever, and then the one that I actually share with people and make publicly available. And the one that's public will have more content in it as far as text goes, compared to the one that I'm actually just talking to as a talking point.
One other point that I wanted to bring up that I know I'm a stickler for, and in addition to me being like a font junkie, I love them, is colors, contrasting colors. Sometimes you'll have a slide that is, like us, our color is purple. And then if you put a lavender on that, you can't see that from across the room. I always
Mhm.
encourage somebody that if you want striking slides, go Google the color chart and see what contrasting colors you can get on your slide or for use for your slides in order to make them more captivating, because those they do matter. Colors, warm colors, attention grabbing colors, advertising colors. Those things really get people's attention and it keeps their attention. So that's just my little 2 cents for that. Anybody else? I have a something to add before I move on.
I was going to add one thing about references, since we have this bullet on here. I like, when I prepare my presentations, I like for them to be short, maybe like 10 slides total. But if you look at the deck, there might be 30 slides in there. And that's because as I'm preparing my presentation, I'll have all my references at the end of it. So if I'm giving my presentation, I might stop at my Q&A slide, but that next slide after that is a slide that says references, and then I'll have maybe 10 or 20 slides with data supporting my talk, references supporting points that I made, et cetera, et cetera. So if there's ever a point in the conversation or during my presentation where somebody says, well, hey, how did you come to that conclusion? And I have to prove a point, I can actually go to the data in the slide, but it doesn't have to be a part of my presentation.
Yeah, and I added that not to say that you had to put that in, I think, what's the standard now? AMA format. So
Oh, yeah, yeah. I don't use any particular, I use my format.
yeah, I put that in there. I think if you're gonna post it, you may want to be, may want to watch for that. But in terms of your references, I encourage you to get some supporting evidence or supporting resources behind your thought process, so that way if somebody does come up, you can immediately reference, send them to a slide, or send them to your GitHub, or you can go to the link or what have you, because that's really important.
Mhm.
Okay. So our next segment here, do we have any questions from the group before we move on? Go
I
on,
wanted
Michael.
to say one thing, and I am personally a very expressive person, and I will say that a lot of times we as speakers are afraid to let our bodies or our faces be our slides. So I, a lot of the time, will talk without note cards, without a slide presentation. It'll just be me and a mic. I even prefer to not have a podium, and I like to engage with the audience. I'm not saying no pacing back and forth like the speed walkers at the Olympics. That's a little aggressive. But I do like to have a good cadence of movement. I use my hands. No, I'm not landing airplanes, but I will do a few hand motions just to remind people that I'm not a robot and I'm not the first generation of AI, but I'm a real person. I have expressions. I laugh, I move, and I find that the talks I've given where people have been the most apt to say, oh, I really enjoyed that talk or I learned, is one where we were having a conversation. You can always give them all of the resources that brought you to your conclusions during your talk after. But during the talk, if you treat it as if it's a conversation or dialogue, to me, even in technical talks, that's been the most powerful. When folks are like, you know what, I'm going to do a few whiteboard sketches, but we're going to talk about this. I've always found myself more engaged, more apt to really want to understand what they were saying, and more apt to pay attention instead of just kind of fading out on, while looking at the deck behind them or anything like that. So that's something I definitely want to encourage a lot of folks to think about when they're planning talks, is to be non-traditional in their approach.
Right.
Can I make a couple points on that?
Sure.
Just to kind of piggyback on that. When you're talking about getting your audience to look at you and focus on you, there's a couple techniques that you can use for that. If you're using PowerPoint, and I think other modern presentation tools have this, if you're in presentation mode and you press the B key, the screen will turn black. It'll just hide your slides and the screen will turn black. If you press the W key, the screen will turn white. It just hides your slides with a plain white screen. So basically, I mean, while you're talking, people have a couple points. They can look at you, they can look at your slides. Maybe they look at their phone, whatever the case is. But if you take the slides away, then that immediately draws their attention to you because you're the only other, thing that's moving up there on the stage. And my second point, I forgot what it was.
It's okay because we are delivering your talk, and I think as a panel, it all ties in with that. I do agree with Grace in regards to your nonverbal communication and having a conversation with the audience. We were at one conference, and the guy, he was so rehearsed. He sounded like a used car salesman, where we couldn't really understand what he was saying because we were too busy laughing at him and it was bad. I have to say we were bad for doing it, but he was just like, he was so nervous. He was so rehearsed that he was like laughing at his own jokes. Like it was just like he was queued up. He sounded like a used car salesman. And I mean, he looked great. He probably smelled great, but he was just pacing back and forth. And he was just like, yeah, ha ha ha. I bet we all do that. And we were like, are you serious, dude? And it goes back to, knowing your audience, what you had going on. And it was just like, he was so into himself. He didn't give his time, himself a chance to connect with the audience and kind of just take a breath. It's okay to breathe. It's okay not to speak every moment. You don't have to fill in the silence with something. You can pace, you can close your eyes, you can take a drink. Those are the things that that you can do, and it's okay to do when you are delivering your talk.
Yeah. I remembered my point now, and I'm going to address that, and then I want to talk about paying attention to your audience, since you kind of brought that up too. So you were talking about non-traditional presentations. One of the best presentations that I've been to that was through this guy's style. It's like, as engineers, we talk about back of the napkin, where we just get a piece of scratch paper or whatever we can find and start to like kind of hash out an idea. This guy's presentation was basically him doing that. He basically had a piece of paper and he was, developing this idea. And at each stage, he took a picture of it with his phone or something. And that was his slide. And then as he presented it, he was able to talk to it just like, you would be sitting next to him at his desk, given, he was talking to you how, just kind of hashing this idea out. It really kind of resonated with the audience because we had all kind of had that same type of experience before, just kind of sitting down with somebody hashing an idea out. But that was his talk. It was really natural. But then also kind of talking about paying attention to your audience. One of the things that I like to do, and this is if I have the opportunity to do it, if I can talk to people that are coming into the room or the area for my talk before I actually start the talk, I'll say, hey, how are you doing? What's your name? What do you hope to get out of this talk? What do you expect? And that way, if I could do that with, say, like 5 or 6 people, then I've got 5 or 6 good points that I can reflect to in my talk. And I'll say, yeah, we're going to talk about that, or, oh no, I didn't think about.
I think Michael froze again.
And let them know that, hey, we made a connection.
Can you repeat that so we can get all your good gems?
Yeah, sure. Where'd I cut out?
You didn't think about that? Oh, I didn't think about that.
Yeah. So if they make a point that I didn't think about, then I'll take a note of that so I can address that in my presentation. And so then while I'm actually giving the presentation, I'll look at the people, that I was able to connect with in that, kind of brief introduction, icebreaker, whatever, before the talk. And when I get to that point that addresses the question that they asked for, then I'll shout them out and say, hey, so-and-so, hey, Larry, does this, this is kind of what we were talking about earlier, how this, addresses your problem or solves your problem or whatever the case is. So that really makes a connection between you as a speaker and your audience. It really kind of, shortens that distance, so to speak.
And I want to add something that Grace said about the podium. So I'm guilty of having a very big voice in conferences. Like, I really don't need the mic, but However, the podium is there, and then they have the mic on you, and then you get the little attachment in the back. So sometimes that works, and sometimes that doesn't. Like I was really guilty. Like when I first, my talk, when I gave my talk, it kept falling off before I started. I was like, oh, this is not gonna work. So I ditched it. And what I did was I still used the podium, but the mic on the podium actually was able to pick up a little further out from the podium, so I was able to still project my voice to the back of the room. So that's just something to be cautious of. If you're a woman and you're going in there with like a dress on and they need to attach it to the back or something like that, is I mean I'm sure there's ways you can get around that, but just something that you need to be cautious of when you're doing your talks, is that they have to attach that mic to you. And the other thing too is wearing earrings, and
Mhm.
it's hitting the mic as well. That doesn't help, but I mean that's a distraction in your talk, because you're seeing your earrings hit it, and then there's that interference. So just a little something there. And then like as far as projecting your voice, here's two things that I learned. I like the whole singer thing. Drink some tea with some honey, get that in there, and also make sure you're not dry, because you're going to do a lot of talking. Like you got to think about, you're talking for at least 30 to 45 minutes, give or take, depending on if it's a tutorial or what have you. So you got to remember you're up there on the stage and all eyes are on you, and the last thing you want to do is start talking and then you lose your voice like 15 minutes later, or you're extra dry, you don't have no water on stage, or you got drunk the night before from the party, and
It happens.
and you gotta get on stage and you're like, oh, I'm kind of a little discombobulated. Oh, I need some water. Oh, this food is nasty. It didn't do nothing for me. Oh, I gotta get it together. I'm just saying, this happens. This is conference things that do happen. So, that's, to me, that's all part of the delivery, because if you're off, trust me, your talk is probably gonna be off. So you got to do your best to hide it. I don't want to say fake it till you make it, but you may have to fake it.
Yeah,
Hey, Dion, Dion Green, are you on the line?
I am.
Hey,
Hello,
thanks
everyone.
for hey. Um, Dion gave us he's a guru when it comes to productions, and I'll let Dion introduce himself. But he gave to Tameika and I some really good advice about, he calls us the tag team on how we go into a conference. And I want you to expound on this, Dion, as far as when
Okay.
it comes to the Q&A portion of your talk and no one wants to ask the question, having your ringer in the audience. I thought that was pretty cool.
Oh, yes. Okay. Everyone, how are you? One thing that I noticed with Tameika and Dion that they do really well is that ringer in the audience, or I just like to call them your hype man. There are, typically for me, I like to have 4 questions that are very important to me, the points that I want to get across. And once you get to your Q&A session, if no one has hit those questions, those 4 points, perhaps I blew it if that's the most important part of my talk or my discussion. So having Dion in the audience to ensure, or Dion plus 2 others, to ensure that my 4 questions are asked, you go ahead and plant someone there for you. And it keeps the conversation going. Some people might say you lose some of the organic feel, or that's too much of a plant, but it doesn't. It brings the audience back alive. I notice as you sit there and you may plug a question in the back of your head, before you have finished your talk, I may have forgotten to ask that question. So having that ringer there, that Dion, that keeps the conversation moving, keeps the talk going for all of your 30 minutes or your 45 minutes. I want you to eat up every one of those seconds that you have with information. And having that ringer there is the best way of doing that.
And also, he brought up a good point to us before is that, and Michael, you touched on it, that your presentation lives on after this talk. Like those couple of minutes that you're up there, you know, your presentation is online, the conference host is using it. And so you want to make sure that you're all the information that you're trying to get out is out on your conference. So I thought that was definitely a great point that he touched on.
And the other thing too, in terms of we have on here flow of your talk, so it really kind of helps uh, to go crazy. When I say go crazy, like really stand in the mirror and deliver your talk, you know, or stand in front of a camera or something to deliver your talk, or FaceTime someone and deliver your talk, whatever the case may be, so you can make sure that the flow is right, right? You go through it and you look at it and you're like, the order is all wrong. Oh, I need to add this. Let me go research that real quick. Let me get that resource, slap it in there, make me a little photo, 3 bullets, boom. Okay, I added that to my talk. But the flow of your talk kind of helps with with how their questions may end up coming. And what I also have learned too is what do I want people to remember the most, and where should I put that in my slides? Do I put that in the beginning? Do I put that in the end? Or do I put that in the middle? Right? And you need something that's going to captivate your audience. So you may have like a strong beginning and a weak end, or you may have a weak beginning, a strong middle, and something that ties back to the beginning point, on the end. But I find that my strong middle is the turning point, right? Because for me, people come in, you got people coming in through the doors, you have people that's not really sure if they want to stay at your talk. They're not sure if this talk is for them. So I try to hit people with the wham wham in the middle. My meat and potatoes is in the middle, and then in the end, I kind of tailor off, because I try to get people to think, to go back to what I said in the middle. Like, oh, you mean this slide number 5? Let me go back there. But that's just my own preference. Someone else may have something else.
And if I may jump in there, um, back to the middle of what you were saying, Tameika, about having that person, whether you record yourself giving your talk and you're going through it, I call that person my director. It is, well, Michael or Grace, since you guys were speaking earlier, do either of you have that person that you bounce your ideas off of, or you give your talk to before you deliver it to the rest of us?
Yeah, definitely. And one of the things that I mentioned earlier is like, using meetups as as kind of a rehearsal ground or whatever. I like to present, even if I'm giving a presentation at a conference, I'll try to do it at 1 or 2 meetups before I do it at the conference. And I'll even tell the people at the meetup, hey, I'm giving this presentation at a conference down the road, or a couple days, weeks, whatever. I would love to have your feedback on it. And so that way I bounce it off of them, get the feedback, make changes that are needed, and kind of, run from there.
The thing that I do is I do the same thing, but normally only for technical talks. I must like improv way too much than I should, since it's not my day job. But I actually think that there's something really magical about not being rehearsed. To go back to something that Dee was saying, I think that when you can tell when someone's practiced too many times. So even for my technical talks, I only practice the tech. I don't practice the actual talk. So I just make sure that the technology is going to work. And I even do one better. I record it, because we all know conferences have the world's worst Wi-Fi. VPN is not working. Your hotspot is not working. Everyone's apparently trying to use your hotspot. They already jailbreak it. So don't even try. And so when it comes to giving talks at conferences, everything that will go wrong has already went wrong and is about to go wrong again. And so I record the technical piece, but I don't practice too much. And I don't know if that's actually bad advice.
No, I think that's great advice, actually. But you're one out of maybe, let's say, 1 out of 20 people that can do that.
And but it's practice, right? The thing is,
yes, it does.
I actually do practice. What I mean is, I don't practice with an audience. because to me, that's the last bit of magic is the audience. But I will absolutely write out a script. I will read the script. I'll print it off. I'll make notes in the script. And then when I've internalized the contents of the script, I throw it away because I want the essence to be me, but I want to have a solid framework. And I think that that's what makes dynamic speakers truly dynamic is you already know what you're going to say. I find I get flustered when I practice too much. By the time it's the day of, I'm a nervous wreck because I've went through it 14 times. I've let 5 people hear it. They all had different opinions. They made all these faces, and I don't know what I should do. And I used to change so much stuff at the last minute and then totally go blank day of. And so I found that if I practice the pieces that, not to say really matter, but usually the tech really does matter. So knowing the pieces of the tech and then just going with the rest after I feel like I know what I want to say, then I personally feel more comfortable.
Okay, let's hold that thought, and I want to skip to one thing that you said about the framework. Would you, and Michael as well, since I just sort of jumped in and put you both on the hot seat, give us 2 points in the framework, because that is a very helpful bit of information, which seems simple to some people, but to others, they have a difficult time setting up their framework for what is going to work, because this is a total foreign world for them. So I like four points, as I mentioned before. What is a couple of items that you put into the framework as you're working all of this together?
Well, kind of like Grace said, as far as having a script, that's good. You don't want to read your script verbatim because, I mean, anybody can read the script and get the same information. But what I like to do is put prompts in my slides. So if I have internalized this information, you know, I might forget it, number one, or I might go off on a tangent, number two. So I'll put prompts in my slides to bring me back to the point. And so as my slides advance, I go to the next slide and it's like, oh yeah, I wanted to say, and then that slide is what, or, you know, maybe it's the picture on the slide, maybe it's the title of it. It just kind of flows me along. So I like to have my slides themselves be the framework or, you know, kind of the roadmap for my presentation.
Yeah, I definitely would echo those sentiments. I like to know that the slides are pushing me along, because when you freeze on stage and you forget every word that you've ever met in your head, which is going to happen, it's inevitable, you are going to forget your entire talk. It's really nice to have slides that bring you back. So that's also one of my frameworks as well, is to have a slide presentation that is a good reminder to me. And then also find a story. I find a lot of times talks feel disconnected. It sounds like a bunch of academic information or technical application of information
Dry.
just said to me. And there's nothing I hate more than that. It's drier than peanut butter on sawdust with a waffle cracker on top. It is disgusting. It's like eating sand sandwiches. People shouldn't really do it. It should be against the law. And so I like to find the story. Every presentation, every talk has a thread that runs through it. And I like to find that thread, and I like to tell people where we're going. So what Tameika said in the beginning, or very recently in the near past, is that she likes to save all the wham bam for the middle instead of the end. That is my favorite tactic. I actually sometimes like to start with the end and then tell them how we got there. And so I like to make sure that the story is what's captivating. We're going to end up right here where we're beginning, but now let me tell you a story. And then taking people on a journey with you to get back to where you started. That, for me, when I see speakers who speak like that, I'm always like, wow, they're great, because that is such a dynamic way to deliver a talk. And it's really not common. Even TED Talks, they don't do that kind of stuff. And so it's really nice to have a framework that I think captivates people early, because that actually reinforces the confidence you need to keep a talk going. It's really discouraging to look out in the audience and people are sleeping, someone is texting their mom. Like, it's just, it's not encouraging to you, especially when you know how hard you have to work to prepare a talk. So it's really nice to have encouraging smiles and glances because you've already got their attention.
Right. Now that goes into a great piece of jokes. To joke or not to joke. I think comedians are like very good storytellers and they
You're
always come
echoing.
back to the punchline. So Michael has prepared a couple of joke slides for us.
Well, I mean, and I also want to talk about not necessarily jokes per se, but humor, because I think jokes and humor, they can be different things, right?
I agree.
Yes,
Um,
sir.
so, so one of the things I think about as being a presenter, it's kind of hard to give a presentation and tell a joke, because for one thing, people may miss it. You know, people aren't always listening to you, to every single word you're saying, so they might miss that joke that you just told, or they might misunderstand it. It might not even be funny to them. You know, they might not get it. Um, and so using humor, I think, is a better approach. And there's some different ways that you can do that. As we were just talking about, using stories, funny stories, is a great way to do that, because people will listen for the beginning of that story, the middle of the story, and the end of the story, and then they'll get it. If you use personal deprecation, like, oh man, I just learned Linux, and the first thing I had to do was build this computer from scratch, and they expected me to do it in a day. That can be a funny story, because you're kind of talking about your funny personal experience that you had. Um, but what I like to do is to use pictures, because pictures kind of, I mean, they say pictures are worth 1,000 words, and it kind of transcends that language barrier. So, in one particular talk, I use this picture that we're looking at right here, where it says "one size fits all," and just kind of looking at it, you kind of get the joke that, okay, one size does not fit all, because you got different shapes and different sizes there. So, I mean, I was talking about a technological concept, or a technology for deployment. And I was using this image to kind of, bring people in with a little bit of humor that, hey, this deployment method that I'm about to talk about, it may not suit you and your organization, but, it might help some of you. So all that is to say is one size, doesn't fit all. But this is kind of how I use a humorous point to get that point across, or humorous picture to get that point across. Can you go to the next slide, please? And this is another one that's kind of funny here. It's like, are you doing something dangerous in your day to day? It's just like people will look at this picture and say, and kind of think like, oh my God, this is crazy. And whatever point that you're making, if you want to tie it to the image, in this case, it would be something like, yeah, in your day to day work, you need to be careful about what you're doing. And so people will kind of, it sinks in when they get the picture and the humor that's tied with it. All right, next slide. It's also good to use pictures for colloquial sayings. So does anybody know what this picture is trying to say?
It's
Are
a
we
pink.
not going to discuss the elephant in the room?
No, it's a pink.
Exactly.
It's a pink
Okay.
elephant. Don't you see?
Not quite yet. Not quite yet. But yeah, instead of saying, hey, we need to address the elephant in the room, you could put a picture up like this, a picture that represents a colloquial saying, and then put, say, for instance, if your team isn't filling out their time cards correctly, but everybody's kind of bouncing around that issue, nobody's really addressing it. You could put on this slide, "Have you done your time card?" question mark. And it just kind of makes everybody think about it, like, oh yeah, yeah, you're right, we need to fill out our time cards. That's just an example. You could use it for any other point, but yeah. Next slide. Yeah, for this one, I mean, there's so many pictures of the running of the bulls that you can tie into some humor. I just went to a presentation last night, and a guy had a picture from the running of the bulls, and of course, it shows people like running out of way of these bulls that are charging down the street, and he was like, "Is your infrastructure safe?" You know. So of course,
5 seconds. He'll be back.
He'll be back.
infrastructure is not safe. So yeah, there's just, and another thing, when I saw this picture, I was thinking about, going into the room with a new idea. It's like, okay, are people going to be accepting of your idea, or are they going to feel some other kind of way about it? You know, that just kind of, the picture itself kind of ties in. Yeah, if you imagine yourself being the bull walking into this room and nobody else feeling, you know, good about what you're having to say to them. But again, this is just another good example of how a picture can convey that humor. And I think that, no, I think I had one more. If you could go to the next slide. Okay, I use this picture at the end of a presentation I did, because it was a really big presentation and I was really nervous about doing this presentation. And I can't recall if I told the people at the beginning, like, hey, I'm kind of excited and nervous about this presentation, but we're going to get through it, that type of thing. More coaching myself than anything else. But then when I got to the end of the presentation, I had this picture on my Q&A slide, because that let me know that, hey, this presentation is done and now I can relax. So, I mean, and that kind of conveyed it to the audience too, like, hey, we made it through, let's kick up our heels and you know, just kind of celebrate a little bit. So even if it's not a purely humorous message, you could still use an image to kind of convey a you know, a feeling to the audience if you'd like to.
Does anybody else have anything to add about humor or have any questions? We can't hear you.
I just want to add something that I previously talked about is when I speak, I in anything, goddamn, I'm giving speeches or meetups or whatever, I'm very conversational type of person. So I when I'm speaking, I like to give conversations. So I look at my talks as a conversation that I'm having, not with my sister girls, but I'm just having a conversation. And so I want to be witty and funny at the same time, and also get my point across as well. So I'm more of a conversationalist. So if you want to give your talks from that perspective, just think about you having a conversation and you can add your jokes or whatever. It may have to be like, you couldn't probably add a joke about, you know, girls trip, but you can add a joke about something that's familiar to everybody, like the 80 meme or something of that nature. So just giving that as an option.
Okay, so we're coming up on our fifth point, and that is distractions. Dion, since you are on the other end and I think you are on your phone, I think I want you to go ahead and lead us up with distractions.
Distractions. Whoa.
We have a couple of
Many.
bullet points. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay, no, go ahead. You first.
We got audio and sound. We got people leaving. We got running out of time, and definitely nerves can be distracting.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, on the technical side of audio, sound, pretty much every conference, I'm expecting there to be a technical glitch. Something will happen. Just like with my day. At the moment, I'm talking to you guys actually from our stage here at my local theater, which I sit on the board of, at the Theater of Gadsden. I wish I had everything proper so you guys could see my perspective with the chairs behind me and the way it makes your heart pound a little bit faster when you're there. So throw in the audio and sound element in there. If that goes perfectly, what about that simple thing of your nerves? That for me is the biggest distraction, because my mind can spin out of control. So all of these points that I've heard mentioned so far, such as the sense of humor, the jokes, as Michael pointed out, it's not necessarily a joke like knock knock who's there, and perhaps the joke is not for the audience. Typically I would say it would be for the speaker to bring you back to focus. I like 4 points so that if I get distracted, I already have 4 questions in my head that I have the answer to, and there's no reason why you as a speaker can't post a question to the audience or multiple questions. That is one simple way to shake it. If you're distracted, if you're thrown off, go back to one of your 4 questions that you have and you have a rock solid answer for. You can use those 4 points anytime throughout your talk to shake your distractions, to bring you back to home base, which is what I refer to as being centered. If you're at that point, you're more like Grace. You can just shoot from the hip, throw out anything, and it's going to come back, and however it comes back, you're going to hit it, and you're not going to knock it out of the room. Let's see, let me go on down the list. Running out of time. Oh, that is a biggie. Running out of time. Let's go back to that person that we mentioned before that might be your director of sorts, friend, colleague, or partner that's out in the audience. That person you should gaze at as often as you can. You position that person somewhere in the room in your eyesight so that person calms you down. In fact, that person is probably the most important person in the room, more important than the speaker, because that person is keeping you together in those moments when you become distracted. And that person is the one sitting there with a time clock and has whatever signal that you guys use, whether it's patting the forehead, smacking your wrist, or holding a hand up that says, you got 5 minutes, 2 minutes, 1 minute, and wrap. All of those things, it's in your preparation. And we get so caught up on the simple, hey guys, and if I'm getting long-winded, just say, D, hold up, let me speak. Okay. So that little trick of having that person, your go-to person, will keep everything in control for you. Honestly, let me look at the last point on the list, nerves. It'll put your nerves in check. You won't even ever have to worry about your nerves again. All you need is that go-to person that helps you make it through all of these things. And even if that person is not with you in the room, if you will practice and rehearse this with that person, you will think that he or she is physically there with you during the talk. Because for me, the most important things that you can do to make sure that you are on point when you're on that stage is prep. Simple prep work. Like there's a book, and I will have to go back into my phone, which I'm talking to you guys on, to find out the name of it, but it helps you with your memory. Guys, this might sound like a silly little thing, but one of my strongest points that I have, I can plug more names in my head than the average person. We go through a conference, I meet you on the show floor, I can plug in at least 200 names without that much of a problem. You guys, if you're able to do that, and you can look out in that room and you can realize there is Denise from PayPal that's sitting there, there is Figo from Huawei, and whoever you need to hit in that audience, and you know their names, you know their faces, that will strengthen everything that you're doing on the stage. Because to me, it's more of a psychology than it is about me being perfect or my shirt, my jokes. It's about my information, and if I'm calm enough to deliver it to you. And I always feel where a lot of us fail is in our introduction. Tameika and Dion, we were talking about this, and if you didn't notice, there's 2 Dions on this panel. But
It's a good thing.
how people fail to take that, I like to say, introduction, hello, and give me 2 minutes to tell me who you are. I want you to take 2 minutes and tell me what you want me to know about who you are. Not just blah, blah, blah. Be strategic about it. If you want me to know about all of the wonderful things that you have done or you're doing or you're contributing to, do it. Let me know. Take 2 minutes and draw me into Grace's world, Michael's world, Tameika's world, Dion's world. And then you've got me. Or Lisa's world. And then you've got me, and then I will follow you along your talk, and I will wait as you stutter because you're nervous, I will laugh at your joke, even though it's a little slow. I will listen to what you are selling me because you got me. So I'm going to stop talking now, and and hopefully I gave you a little bit of information or answered the question. I
You
can get
did.
long-winded. I'm sorry.
No worries. Thank
You're
you so much. Do you have any other things to add in regards to distractions?
Yeah, if the audio stops, don't stop. That's what I'm gonna say. Don't stop. Like keep going. I haven't done this, but I really want to. I really want to jump off the stage in my talks because I feel like I don't connect enough. That's just me, but I got to stay on stage because the camera's rolling. But for me, I like to make sure I project my voice and I make sure I connect with the audience. And I am one of those ones like I pick on you. If you sit in the back, I make sure I look at you like 4 or 5 times to make you uncomfortable because I'm gonna call on you and ask a question, so I try to make sure you stay engaged. But that's just my tactics, That's just me. I'm not telling you to do that, but that works for me because now if I'm projecting my voice and talking to that person in the back of the room and I see the people in the front, they're gonna pay attention because that's just what you do if you're sitting in the front. Some people do fall asleep, but I mean, you still have to kind of wake them up. But I like to focus on the people in the back of the room because they sat back there because they want to slide out. So I want to capture them. That's just my thing. That's just a little tidbit that I try to do.
I just wanted to, I guess, share a couple points on, I guess, losing people's attention and people leaving. If you have the, I guess, ability, if it's a smaller group and maybe it's not being recorded on video, I like to move around the room if I can, and I will, talk to people in the audience as I'm presenting. I will call people by name. I will touch them. So if I see somebody that's kind of like looking at the phone, I'll just lay my hand on their shoulder, and just kind of talk to them. I won't say anything like, hey, get off your phone, or hey, you fall asleep or whatever. But I will just touch them, let them know that I see them, and that to try and bring them back into the, bring their attention back to the presentation. And as far as people leaving, I mean, a lot of times that can't be helped. But one issue that you may run into if you're at a larger conference is that the conference may be running behind schedule, particularly if it's a one track or a single track conference, which means that all the speakers in the conference are speaking on the same stage back to back to back. So if one speaker or one kind of, hitch, problem comes up, then that pushes everybody's talk back. And yet, you still have schedules to keep. So in that case, what I like to do is just kind of own the problem and say, hey, audience, I realize that we're running a little bit late, but if you need to get up and you need to go, by all means, just go ahead and just kind of handle that yourself. That way, you're kind of giving people permission to leave, because for the most part, at least me as an attendee, I think that people are just kind of sitting there. They want to leave, but they're not going to leave because they don't want to be rude. They don't want to interrupt you. They don't want other people looking at them while they're leaving. But if you give them permission to leave and just kind of own it as the speaker, like the person who's in charge of this presentation, then that just kind of puts everybody at ease, because then they're like, oh yeah, okay, he said that I could, or she said I can sneak out while he's talking, and nobody's going to be bothered by it. The other thing is, it kind of goes back to a point I said earlier. I was thinking that there's two people or two reasons why people will leave your talk. Number one, they're not interested. Number two, you're running out of time or short on time, and only one of those can you really manage, and that's the interest part. So if you talk to your audience or get, really have a feel for who's in your audience and what they want to hear, then you can do a better job of keeping their interest, and that will keep them hopefully from walking out on you. But if people are getting up and walking out, I say let them go. They're adults. You're an adult. You can't stop people and make them bend to your will that way. But just own it. Just let them go and stay focused on what you came to do and the message that you're trying to deliver, and just don't stop.
I wanted to add something when it comes to like nerves, and I guess it goes on to people leaving as well. It's really important to get us to conferences in numbers. I love the the fact that me and Tam, we try to travel in the buddy system. When you meet friends at conferences and you make a plan to meet each other at conferences, you can support each other at these talks, and it feels good. And I like when we walk into colleagues conferences and they're just like, you can tell on their face, their nerves just dwindle when they see us walk in and we come sit in the front. And when it's that time for somebody to ask a question, we ask a question, and we make sure that we're going to be that gallery for them, the peanut gallery. We're like, yeah, and they see us come in droves, and it may be us two or three or just the people that we met and connected there, but that makes a big difference. So if you're going to go to the conference, get a friend. It helps if you guys are on the same track. Sometimes the talk that you might not want to hear, but just going in and showing up, it makes the nerves, it makes a world of difference.
This is a true story, and then we're gonna go to the next slide. That's how I met Grace. So when I was at the Puppet Conference, there's somebody was like, "Hey, this is an intro talk," and I saw, and we were me and one from Blacks in Technology was standing outside, and we were looking, and we were like, "Is she getting on stage?" I was like, "I was gonna go to another conference. I was gonna go to another talk, but I'm going to her conference. I'm going to her talk, and I'm gonna sit in the front." Let me tell you, after the talk, she was like, I know she wasn't coming to sit in the front. She talking about then you gonna come sit in the front and then gonna raise your hand and ask questions. I sure did. I sit in the front and I asked questions. But I did that to show support because oftentimes when you are on stage and you're looking out, you don't see anybody that look like you. You don't see anybody that's of your color or your
Absolutely.
gender. So I want you to know that I'm here for you. I'm up front. I'm gonna ask a question. I don't care what it is. I'm gonna look it up online. If I don't know what the topic is, I'm gonna ask a question because I want to make sure I engage with you because I know how hard it is to get up on
Right.
stage to talk. Much less I do meetups, so I understand with doing meetups and coming up with topics every week, making sure your tech is correct, making sure you go do the research on that. If somebody asks a question, you can kind of go out and grab that question, the answer to that question real quick. I totally understand. So don't be afraid to like meet someone at the conference and talk to the person and like, hey, I'm doing a talk. You should come check me out. Don't be
Mhm.
afraid to pitch to people at the conference.
Yep.
May I add in on that, Tameika? Um, One point I wanted to make before we close tonight, and I think this might be a good point in it. When you are a speaker, a lot of the speakers seem to think that their job is over when they leave the stage. No. When you're a speaker at a conference, you're working the entire conference. I ask that all of you guys, when you are asked to speak, that you engage in the full conference. Any other talks that you can go to. The expo hall, you guys, it's a must. You carry that talk from the stage into the expo hall. You're going to encounter all of those that were in your talk and listen. They're going to bring the questions up. So anything that you failed to get across during the talk, you have hundreds or thousands of people to engage with and continue this talk. All of the activities that we schedule for you guys after, please go. You have no idea the work that you can do over a few cocktails. And as you know, if you come to a conference that I'm working at, we have a lot of after hours events. So you guys really need to be there and continue to take your talk, well, I'll just say on the road. You're going to go from the stage to the hall to other talks and continue to meet people within your group.
And FYI, what he's talking about is O'Reilly. Dion is an official card carrying member for O'Reilly. So 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 he has how long you been doing O'Reilly? Well, how long have you been doing conferences now?
I am an official vendor with O'Reilly, and I've been working with them for 4 years, but I've been doing conferences for 20 years, officially in June.
Right.
And I've worked in every sector from biomedical to stone and granite to tech. And the tech industry is the most interesting that I have found myself in. And it's the one industry where I see that you guys, your voice carries so much weight and actually important because we're moving so quickly. Um, in our what we do is a conference is considered business to business or face to face marketing, and it has been around for, I can't even give you the number of years, and it is something that is not going to go away. People have tried. The virtual conference, it works very well, but it still has not replaced the actual face-to-face conversation that moves your industry. And because your industry moves so quickly, compared to other industries, we'll say in the wholesale market that I worked in, we will have a conference, and most industries are a year to 2 years ahead of mainstream market. How far ahead are you guys? You change so quickly. It could be a year, or it could be 6 months, or you could be a month out before it goes to mainstream. So you guys have this platform of business to business marketing, and you have to open your mouths.
I hear
Giselle,
you.
you had a question for us?
Yeah, I was just wondering what it means to be an O'Reilly vendor.
O'Reilly vendor. Okay, I'm not a full-time employee of O'Reilly. I am a contractor or vendor. O'Reilly also uses, they consider us to be a friend of O'Reilly. A foo is what they would call me. I actually work 6 conferences for O'Reilly per year at the moment.
So the last point we want to touch on, which is like a really important point that hinders a lot of us from even attending conference, is travel and expenses. As we know, conferences can go anywhere from $100, which is the Women in Linux conference on August 19th. Shameless plug. Get your tickets now. To a conference like O'Reilly or Puppet, where it's like $2,500 a ticket, and that's just the ticket. It's not the travel, it's not the hotel, it's not anything. But the first bullet we're going to go into is, a couple of points is who is going to cover the costs, asking your job to cover expenses, the benefits of an Airbnb, travel scholarships. Women in Linux, we are big on the scholarships. If we can get you any type of assistance in getting you to conference, we are going to post it, and conferences that cover expenses. So, Tameika, you want to take the lead on this?
Yeah, I take the lead. So, one of the biggest things while we're doing this is so that you can get your talk submitted to conferences and get travel and expenses taken care of. Shout out to Dion and O'Reilly. They're very good at that, of taking care of your expenses to conferences. And when I say taking care of expenses, I mean like your flight and your hotel as you are going on as a speaker. That that also means that you can get a diversity scholarship, but the diversity scholarships don't cover your travel expenses. However, you do get some kickback from the diversity scholarship. So don't sleep on the O'Reilly conferences. I think some of you have gone to the O'Reilly conferences, and also don't sleep on the fact for the O'Reilly conferences of going to the conferences and helping out as a volunteer for the conference gets you a ticket as well too. So that's just a plug for O'Reilly. Hopefully we get some kickback for that plug.
Thank you very much.
Hopefully we get some kickback from the plug. Ran off on the plug twice there. So the other thing I want to talk about too is some of the boutique conferences. So I give you an example. A big data conference reached out to me, and they're doing one in New York, and they're doing one in San Francisco, and so forth. And so I asked her. She's like, "Can you come speak?" I said, "Sure." And then I asked, I said, "Are you cover travel and expenses?" And you're like, "No." You asked me 2 weeks before the conference. My answer is still no, because it's 2 weeks before the conference. It's going to San Francisco. I'm going coast to coast. That's time off, and I got to pay for myself just to speak at your conference. So I saw this with Kelsey. He did his talk from his hotel. So I'm not opposed to conferences doing allowing you to do your talk remotely. I don't know who those conferences are, but I would love if the conferences would allow you to do it remotely. That would be great.
That's how the Tampa Bay startup did. That's how they had Brad Feld come in. He came off of a run, and I was like, man, he at least could have been at his desk. But he literally ran like 7 miles, sat at a chair, and posted up for our conference.
Yeah, Dion, you're echoing.
I don't know why.
Anybody else want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a little bit to add. You did mention papercall.io. Pardon me. They're a good source for finding conferences that do provide resources for their speakers, which conferences cover expenses. Pardon me.
Bless you.
I think asking your job is an important part, but for me, it's kind of difficult because I'm not at a technology company, and I think it's easier for people who are at companies that produce technology. So if you're at a company that's selling a product, or you have customers that you support and you want to describe what you're doing for those customers to potential customers, then maybe you're in a better position to have your employer pay for your expenses to go to a presentation. But for me, I'm a little bit more independent. So I kind of rely on conferences that are willing to either pay my expenses or they're close enough to me so that I don't have expenses. So I look for a lot of conferences in the LA area that, I'm not going to have to pay for lodging or travel or that type of thing, that I can just get to it. So I would say look for conferences in your area, maybe conferences that you could just zip out to for half a day or something like that. Also minimizes your time off work as well.
Giselle, you had a question?
Yeah, I was wondering how common is it to have conferences that are willing to pay your flight and lodging?
It's pretty common these days. And I apologize for the echo.
And it's a lot more common as well if if they have a community around them. So what I'll say about that is Puppet has an open source community. And so we actually have open source community and community scholarships for PuppetConf. And we have an intentional focus on minorities of all kinds. So whether that is handy capable, whether that's orientation based, whether that's race based, whether that's socioeconomic class based, we have an intentional focus on making sure that we have representation from different groups. And so they give scholarship tickets. So maybe your room and board isn't paid for, but you can at least get full admissions into the conference and have a full conference pass. So I think a lot of conferences will actually do that. The room and board part, sometimes you gotta use other organizations that you know of to get that covered, but a lot of times they'll at least cover that part. And then if you speak at the conference, I've never spoken at a conference and not had my lodging and my ticket covered. So I think if you're
I have.
Why?
Yeah, I know. I mean, for me, it was an endeavor that I undertook because I really wanted to speak at this conference. But I mean, after going through that and seeing how I was kind of put out, I doubt I would do it again unless it was a purpose that I was really kind of passionate about.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would, for people that are just like, okay, I don't want to be put too out of my way when it comes to conferences, start locally and just get a ticket. You already live in the town, room and board is covered. Try to find that local scholarships and start we call it blooming where you plant it. Start there first before you venture out to something you can't financially handle, because most conferences start during the week. You have to take off of work. So it is a big endeavor. And everybody can't do that. Everybody can't just take off in the middle of the week to go to a conference halfway across the country or sometimes even across the world, especially in a conference. Is going to ask you, would your job help out in the marketplace? So they do have these budgets to cover some of that when their employees are going to speak at some of these conferences.
Can I ask
Couldn't hear you, ma'am.
how you figure out which scholarships you can apply for? Like, is there one place where you can see them all, or do you have to apply according to what conference you want to go to?
I think it really kind of depends on the conference. However, Google does provide scholarships for women to attend technical conferences. I forget what the name of the scholarship is, but I will find the URL for you and get that information to you. And through their program, you let them know what conference you want to go to, even if they're not a participant in the conference, or you're not really trying to speak, or whatever the case is. And they will give you funds, or help you get to the conference.
The one that you're talking about was actually posted in Slack. If you look under scholarships, Giselle, or look up Google inside of
I looked
scholarships.
at Google before,
It's,
but it was only, they did have more than one, but when I looked at it was for specific conferences. So like Grace Hopper, and then the SHIP conference in November, they would sponsor you for, but you didn't say like any conference.
and I want to add, try the AAUW. I posted that too. They have some scholarships and scholarships for conferences and scholarships for college as well too. So check that one out. I posted that link the other day. Any questions anybody has? I want to kind of turn it over to everyone for questions and answers and so forth that you may have.
I think do I still have an echo? So we're gonna wrap this up. So I want to get any of the panel, if you had any last minute thoughts or one of things that you wanted to add before we wrapped up the meetup, since we don't have any questions and everybody's echoing except Grace.
I do. I want to encourage everybody to make sure that you go and actually post yourself
Speed it
onto
up.
a conference to submit a talk. And also you can talk on women in Linux as well. We have that forum open for you if you want to give a talk, a 30-minute talk, or a 20-minute talk. We're open. We just want you to get experience, and we just want you to have exposure.
All right. So we're gonna close it out. Thank you, everybody. Grace, Linda, Michael, with Giselle, she's here. Thank you for all of your questions. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Dion. Of course, thank you, Tameika. And again, we want to see everybody back. Of course, you always have the opportunity to speak with women in Linux. Sign up for a meetup. Try us out. Do a talk. We're here for you. Thank you so much.